Now, when you're actually on the ice, you're set up, you're trying to make the approach. We set up on this weed line right here. We literally have a weed line. I have maybe 8-9 inches of weeds in this hole right here. I got about 6 inches of weeds there, and the weeds really start inches on the other side of this hole. So we're in a perfect spot as these fish should be cruising back and forth in this kind of steeper wall on this weed line. Now, you see my approach here. I got 2 rods. The idea here is I am fishing a still rod and an active rod. Your goal, as every ice angler approaches the ice, is to build a pattern as quickly as possible. Every time you're on the ice, it's about building a pattern. Whether you were here yesterday or a week ago, things change on a day-to-day basis, sometimes on an hour-to-hour basis. So really, building a pattern and staying up on a pattern is the goal every day, and that's how you're gonna become a more successful angler. So with that being an option, we start off, it's all about presenting those options. So I'm gonna have a still rod and an active rod. My still rod is a bobber. So basically, you know, if you're not familiar with the slip bobber, we can definitely show you that in a video, but I have a really small ice jig, and I'm actually using a piece of shrimp. This is a piece of salad shrimp that you buy at a grocery store. I have it on a small jig in that same color pattern as that shrimp, so everything's very natural. Above that, I have a small split shot. Then I have an ice buster barb that snaps onto my line. Up the line here, I'm fishing in 6 feet of water. And right up here, I have a bobber stop that we can show you. And that bobber stop is actually holding my depth. So as I lower it down, that shrimp is sitting probably 4 to 6 inches off bottom, right at the level those trout should be coming on as they slide up and down that weeds. Now, we like that. The main reason we use a bobber is for a couple things. One, it allows me to really have an exact, precise depth. So this bobber is sitting, like I said, 6 inches off bottom. It's perfect. So many guys don't use a bobber, and they might have watch their rod tip, or they might have a spring bobber. The problem is everybody's got their rhythm for this, right? They hit the bottom and they go, I'm going to go a half crank up. That's not precise. You set it down, it doesn't sit right, and all of a sudden you are having a lot of variables that you can't control. As where the slip bobber, you can put that bait exactly 4 inches, 6 inches, 9 inches. You can really build that depth flawlessly. And 2, when a fish hits the slip bobber, there's no resistance. So the bobber can go down, I can pick up the rod and get ready for the take. I can let them hit it again, and they don't feel anything, just to have a more natural presence. So it's a dynamite way to fish that still rod. Now the biggest thing with this rod here, very rarely do I move it. You know, a lot of guys are always given this activity, but the concept here is this rod is still as my dead stick, this rod is active. And there's a lot of days on the ice to where the fish want a bait moving a lot, and there's a lot of days where the fish literally want the bait, you know, totally 100% still. There might be a fish looking at this right now, and if I give it a little twitch every so often, that fish might get deterred and might swim away because he wants it still. So again, you see it all the time where guys are working an active rod on one, and then they have a dead stick, but every so often they move it. I leave that one still. All my activity is on this rod, and I keep them close together. Now, a lot of times these rods will both catch fish. Sometimes just one will catch fish. The biggest thing to think about is it catching fish individually, or are they helping each other? If I'm only catching fish on my active rod, a lot of times I might be able to get rid of this rod. If I am never seeing activity on this and it's just getting in the way, it's slowing me down, feel free to lose it. But if I'm catching fish on the dead stick, a lot of times I will still continue to jig instead of putting 2 dead sticks down, because a lot of times the movement of this one is pulling the fish in, and then they're taking the still bait. And a lot of times if I remove the active rod, I won't have as many fish come in the area because they're not getting drawn to that area by the activity. So if that makes sense, if they're hitting just the active rod, sometimes I'll go with 2 active rods. That's a great option for you. Oh, there we go right there on the active rod. Just as I was wiggling it. But again, if they're hitting the active rod, maybe try 2 of them. Oh, beautiful. Look at that. A small brown trout. This little guy is active. Beautiful German brown. I mean, look at the colors. That fish just absolutely hammered it. He ate it up. There we go. You can see right there. Throw him back. All right, so again, the active rod versus still rod. The active rod, if they're hitting the active rod, stick to 2 of them. If they're hitting the still rod, I still continue to have the active rod, because again, that's going to be a drawing force to pull fish in the area, and then they'll hit that still rod. So almost any time I'm on the ice, I love to have the 2-rod approach to give the fish options. The faster I, as the angler, can build a pattern, the more successful I'll be. And we always have a rule of thumb to building pattern. 1's a fluke, 2 is a theory, and 3 is a pattern. So I want to get 3 fish on a technique, on a certain colored jig, on a bait. I want to get 3 fish on something that's the same, and that's where I know I have built a pattern and I continue to continue fishing with that pattern. 1's a fluke, 2's a theory, 3's a pattern. Guys, put that to work, and I promise you, give the fish options. You're going to catch a lot more fish at the end of the day.